Hi, my name is Madeline Carter, and today I'm going to be talking about how the Motion Picture Association rating system negatively impacts teens in this current day and age, and how we can fix it. Have you ever been put into a situation, especially as a teenager, that you knew you weren't prepared for? You had never polished those tools for decision making in that moment. You had consistently relied on the help of your older peers or your parents to help you make these kinds of decisions. You felt like you were on your own. As a teenager, many of us grew up with the idea that being young is the most fun you're ever going to have. And trying to jam pack all of the fun that you can have into a small collection of years can lead to a lot of behaviors that are overall ineffective and can have adverse and negative consequences. Many teens obtain their information on taboo topics such as sex and drugs from the media they consume. Not only music and television, but also the films that they watch. And seeing those visual representations can have a very negative impact on how they're able to conduct their decision making. Common Sense Media found that in 2019, over 54% of teenagers were obtaining all of their news from social media outlets. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and other platforms all were what created a connection between young adults and teenagers and the outside world. This makes the rating system and what teenagers are exposed to all the more imperative. Though the media has never sought out to be the most realistic depiction of teenage life or real life, it is important to note that despite its reliance on sensationalism and unrealistic expectations to maintain a fantasy, those are important things when creating viewership and helping the industry and helping it stay relevant. But those do very little to help the teens and those growing up on these forms of media. There's a social pressure to try to get everything done, to hit all of those milestones in order to have the most fulfilled and the most successful life. And my fear is that by pigeonholing teens and assuming that either all or none are ready for certain situations, it draws away from their own autonomy for decision making. Teenagers are expected to make decisions about where they go to college, their life path, even their finances. Yet they aren't properly given the tools to educate themselves on taboo topics with the help of the media that is presented. There are large discrepancies between the rating system for cinematic film and in theaters and for streaming. The cinematic releases are all rated by the MPA, formerly known as the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association. And that is a trade association that combines representation from the top 5 film studios in the United States. This is somewhat separate from the television rating system, but both of them bleed together. It is important to note that throughout these discrepancies, four of those major film studios are representing what is released in theaters, whereas only one is representing streamed content. Because of this, the parents, or the CARA, that are then appointed to the voluntary rating board as their full-time careers, have more of a bias towards how they're going to rate films that are released in theaters versus streamed content. And during the coronavirus pandemic, teenagers are consuming more streamed content than ever before. The accessibility to potentially mature content is higher than it ever was. How are we going to mend this gap? First, we must address, why are these depictions of teenage life so sensationalized? By doing this, I'm going to break them down into 2 categories. Usually, these depictions follow either over-sensationalized and over-romanticized depictions, so gratuitous drug use, unconsequential sex, all of those things without actually having discussions about why these teenagers are using drugs or how to practice safe sex. It's all within the context of a part of a movie because it feels like that's what the teenagers are supposed to be doing. And it offers little education and zero showing of consequences. This is often marketed as kind of a gimmick where it's real and raw teen content. And there are shows like HBO's Euphoria that, though they depict drug addiction and they also depict sexual activity, the actors that play these teenagers are older than the characters they are playing, and they are not minors. And they depict very visual representations of content that would not be allowed to be depicted by minors. Yet they do so by using fancy colors, lighting, and costumes as a way to trivialize these topics instead of offering a proper sense of education. The next type would be fear-based. This sometimes has religious undertones, but it's often more found in television. It's seen in very special episodes or in made-for-TV Lifetime movies. And it's often addressing a last resort situation. It can tend to be used for depictions of drug addiction or teenage pregnancy, where a person has fallen to rock bottom and they need to be saved. Both of these are actually equally detrimental to the health of teenagers because, as the University of Michigan Health has stated, that teenagers' cognitive development from the ages of 15 to 18 are the most crucial when forming empathy. Teenagers will be able to understand these characters, but as they state, they often strongly believe that their ideals and ideas are the most true. Teenagers are seeking out autonomy over their own decision-making, and if they can't see a sense of reality in these depictions, they will eschew either, and neither will provide any information on how to actually address these situations. Jack Valenti, the head of the MPA at the time when the rating system was amended into the Hays Code in 1968, stated that he did not have child behavioral therapists on the panel. He wanted real people. He wanted parents. Although this seems like a great idea in theory, this does little to reflect the nuances between children and maturity levels. Oftentimes, children who are exposed to higher forms of trauma or who are exposed to mature situations before they are ready do not necessarily develop a higher sense of maturity, but they are more socially aware that these mature situations do happen. And this does little to protect them. It also does not offer any sort of bounds as to the different types of parenting and the different parenting styles. Someone who parents completely different from my own would be the ones dictating what I could view, even though they had never met me and they did not know me. So how do we fix it? There are many different nonprofit organizations, such as Common Sense Media, that offer tools where you can just type in a movie or television show, and it will dissect the different types of content that are available within that. It will show the examples of the language used within context, which is very important. It will also break down the different taboo categories such as violence, sex, drugs, nudity, and it will decipher how much and in which context each of those are depicted within the piece of work. I think it's also very important that we get rid of that letter. PG, PG-13, all that matters is what's underneath. Why is the film rated the way it is? Profane language used in a film about war is much more applicable than profane language used where a character is cursing just to curse. Yet with this current rating system, the language could be the deciding factor as to what is rated PG-13 and what is rated R. The reason why this system hasn't been amended sooner is because PG-13 is where the money is. PG-13 movies are notorious for making more than rated R films. And directors are constantly pressured to cut out content or to completely derail the content of their work in order to maintain a rating that will make their studios money. The MPA has touted that they are there to make directors, or to allow directors to be able to make their content freely and to its fullest extent. But at what cost? By analyzing the content in which these situations and in which this morally divisive material is presented, parents are also able to make a bond with their teenagers. They can talk things out together. Even just simply reading a synopsis together can create a sense of trust, and teenagers will feel that they have the own autonomy to their decision making. And parents will also be able to bond with their child and kind of see where they are in their life. And lastly, I think that appointing board-certified psychologists for adolescent psychology could really be beneficial to the rating system in that it is simple to address what is on the screen. But if you're uneducated and unversed on how these could have adverse reactions on teens and the people the content is being presented to, that does very little to show the longevity of the content and its benefits and negative qualities. Ultimately, I believe that all of us should be able to have the right to access whatever kind of content we would like. And as the Big Screen Cinema Guide suggests, film ratings are not the law. There are many theaters that do not show a film's rating, one of them being AFI Silver in downtown Silver Spring. But simply, they will show underneath the content and the context what is depicted and why is it depicted. And I think many people can take note, and maybe the next time that you watch a movie, you can look underneath the letter rating and see what you think. Thank you guys for listening.